Schoolhouse Rock turned 3-minute jingles into the unofficial curriculum of an entire generation. Premiering in 1973, it slipped into ABC's Saturday morning lineup with bite-sized lessons that made math, grammar, civics, and science feel less like homework and more like a soundtrack you never asked for but couldn't shake. Bob Doro's 3 is a magic number, Jack Sheldon's gravelly conjunction junction, Lynn Arntz's preamble singing narrator, and Dave Fishberg's world-weary, I'm just a bill guided kids through subjects that textbooks struggled to make stick. Across roughly 41 original episodes from 1973 to 1985, then a 1990s revival, direct-to-video segments in 2002 and 2009, stage shows, tribute albums, and a record-setting Kennedy Center concert, the catalog grew to roughly 65 segments. Yet behind those hummable hooks was a saga of ad agency experiments, strict time limits, hip-hop samples, fan-driven resurrections, and creators who never saw the kind of payday their work might make you imagine. Before we roll the film strip, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our deep dives into classic TV that refuses to fade away. In the early 1970s, advertising executive David McCall noticed something that didn't add up. His son could sing every Rolling Stones lyric by heart, but ask him what 7 times 8 was, and he went completely blank. Rock lyrics stuck effortlessly. Multiplication tables didn't stand a chance. McCall turned to jazz musician Bob Doro, known for witty lyrics and a mischievous ear, who had built whole songs out of unexpected source material, including a novelty tune inspired by the legal warning printed on mattress tags. McCall handed him a simple challenge: turn math into music. Doro came back with 3 is a magic number, a song that wrapped multiplication in warm chords and gentle swing. Adults at the agency found themselves humming it long after the tape stopped, which was perhaps the clearest sign that something special was happening. Illustrator Tom Yohe heard the demo, started sketching visuals, and suddenly the idea wasn't just educational, it was real entertainment. McCall and producer George Nowell took the package to ABC. Michael Eisner, then a young executive overseeing children's programming, liked what he saw but wasn't fully convinced. Then animation legend Chuck Jones, the mind behind Bugs Bunny, happened to be in the room. Jones watched 3 is a magic number, turned to Eisner, and delivered the simplest pitch in television history: buy it. Nowell later called what followed the quickest deal in television history. On January 6, 1973, Multiplication Rock premiered, and kids across America discovered that learning could genuinely groove. Years later, Eisner admitted people mentioned Schoolhouse Rock to him more than Raiders of the Lost Ark or The Lion King. Schoolhouse Rock didn't begin life with the name everyone now knows. For its earliest seasons, the project was branded Scholastic Rock, a title that fit the educational mission and felt natural for a Madison Avenue agency. There was just one problem. A very large publishing company already owned that word. Scholastic Incorporated, the longtime publisher of educational books and classroom magazines, had been operating under the Scholastic name since the 1920s. By 1975, after the show had aired several seasons under that banner, Scholastic Incorporated brought in a lawyer and made it clear the title needed to change immediately. The team needed a new name fast, and the solution borrowed its rhythm from rock and roll itself. Elvis Presley's 1957 hit Jailhouse Rock provided the template. They swapped Jailhouse for Schoolhouse, kept the punchy cadence, and suddenly the show had a name that felt rebellious and fun rather than remedial. Even after the on-air title changed, the production company kept the legal name Scholastic Rock Incorporated as a subsidiary of McCaffrey and McCall. Schoolhouse Rock, with its echo of the king of rock and roll, sounded like something kids actually wanted to watch on a Saturday morning. If Schoolhouse Rock segments always felt as tight and punchy as a classic pop single, that was no accident. It was a hard rule from ABC. The network needed uniform 3-minute interstitials to fill tiny gaps between Saturday morning cartoons, the same spaces used for commercials. Every segment had to fit that exact slot without exception. For the creative team, mostly veterans of advertising, those constraints felt familiar. They were used to telling stories in 30 seconds. 3 minutes was a luxury if you knew how to use it properly. Doro's original 3 is a magic number ran considerably longer in its first draft. When editors laid out the timing, something had to go. Verses were cut, lines trimmed, intros shortened. Tracks like My Hero Zero and The Four-Legged Zoo lost verses or instrumental sections in their TV versions. The time limit could have strangled creativity. Instead, it relentlessly sharpened it. Writers had to grab attention instantly, teach something concrete, and land a memorable hook before the clock ran out. Every lesson was polished until there wasn't a single wasted beat remaining anywhere in the track. Long before educational content became a buzzword, the team behind Schoolhouse Rock wanted genuine proof that their songs actually taught something meaningful. Catchy alone was never going to be enough. After finishing 3 is a Magic Number, they took it to a place where jingles didn't automatically impress anyone: real classrooms. Working with educators at Bank Street College of Education in New York City, they played the song for students and watched carefully what happened. The results were undeniable. Kids didn't just hum along. They actually retained the math facts embedded in the lyrics hours later. The combination of melody, rhythm, and repetition locked information into place in a way worksheets rarely managed. That early success turned Bank Street into an ongoing creative partner for the entire run of the series. From then on, every script and lyric went through a thorough review with educators before hitting the air. Their role became especially critical during America Rock when the series tackled the Constitution, the legislative process, and westward expansion. It was one thing to make multiplication feel magical. It was another thing entirely to sum up the birth of a nation in 3 minutes without mangling the history. For millions of kids, Bob Doro was simply the gentle voice telling them that 3 is a magic number. But long before he was explaining multiplication on Saturday morning television, he was a deeply respected figure in the jazz world. His 1956 debut album Devil May Care was packed with clever chord changes and lyrics that walked a fine line between sophisticated and sly. That playful intelligence was precisely what caught McCall's attention years later. Then came Miles Davis. In 1962, the famously selective trumpeter recorded 2 songs with Doro, making him one of the very few vocalists ever featured on a Miles Davis record. Years later, in a 2004 interview, Doro described Davis as a complete didactic tyrant, his tongue-in-cheek way of saying Davis had ironclad ideas and never wasted a single stroke. That blend of musical depth and lyrical wit made him the perfect architect for Schoolhouse Rock. He approached each assignment like a jazz composition, weaving in unexpected key changes that kept every tune from feeling like flat children's music. He earned a Grammy nomination in 1974, and the National Endowment for the Arts honored him with a Jazz Masters Award in 2019. When Bob Doro passed away on April 23, 2018, at age 94, he left behind 2 intertwined legacies, one in jazz history and one living permanently in the memories of every kid who ever learned math from his melodies. Schoolhouse Rock used real children to build its authentic sound. When it came time to record backing vocals, Doro and his fellow musicians didn't want a polished studio choir. They wanted something that actually felt like a classroom, so they simply brought in their own kids. Doro's daughter, Ari Doro, was among the small chorus, joined by other children connected to the production. These were not trained performers. They were real kids with all the unfiltered enthusiasm and occasional wobble that honestly implies. You can hear that authenticity most clearly in The Four-Legged Zoo, where Doro's relaxed lead lines bounce off the kids' eager responses, turning the track into something that sounds less like a session and more like a call-and-response lesson happening joyfully in real time. This wasn't some vast network production backed by endless budgets and focus groups. It was a scrappy, family-driven experiment cooked up by musicians and ad creatives who genuinely believed kids could learn and groove at the same time. For one generation, 3 is a magic number will always be the gentle track that made multiplication feel manageable. For another, it's the backbone of a hip-hop classic and a surprise presence in a superhero blockbuster. In 1989, the Long Island group De La Soul released their debut album 3 Feet High and Rising. They took Doro's tune and transformed it into the magic number, reinterpreting the familiar melody as a statement of group identity during the Daisy Age era of peace, positivity, and offbeat creativity in hip-hop. Clearance issues kept the entire album locked away from streaming services for decades while its legend quietly grew. That made its sudden reappearance in Spider-Man No Way Home in 2021 feel even more surreal. As the credits rolled, the magic number played over doodle-style visuals echoing Schoolhouse Rock's animation while three different Spider-Men shared the screen. The filmmakers chose the song specifically to nod at the trio of heroes. Decades after its debut, Doro's tune had traveled from Saturday morning television to alt-rap landmark to superhero finale, proving his central thesis over and over again with each new chapter. 3 notes, and you're already completely there. Conjunction Junction, Conjunction Junction, what's your function? Written by Bob Doro and performed by jazz trumpeter Jack Sheldon, Conjunction Junction premiered on November 17, 1973, as part of Grammar Rock. The episode unfolds in a train yard where boxcars labeled and, but, and or hook up thoughts like freight cars on a track. Kids could see and hear simultaneously how these small words connected bigger ideas. Sheldon's performance sealed the deal for generations. A jazz veteran and longtime sidekick on The Merv Griffin Show, he brought a relaxed, soulful drawl that made the lesson feel more like a bluesy club number than a grammar drill. The endlessly repeated refrain didn't just explain the concept clearly. It permanently burned it into memory. Decades later, people who struggle to define a subordinate clause can still sing the entire breakdown without missing a word. The segment turned a tiny sliver of grammar into a genuine cultural touchstone and proved that with the right metaphor, even the smallest parts of speech could feel like undeniable stars. For kids in the 1970s and 80s, the entire U.S. legislative process boiled down to one unforgettable image: a weary roll of paper sitting patiently on the Capitol steps. I'm Just a Bill debuted on March 27, 1976, as part of America Rock. Jazz pianist Dave Frischberg wrote it with remarkable economy, distilling committee hearings, congressional votes, and presidential signatures into a story any child could follow and remember. The voice of that tired but hopeful Bill belonged to Jack Sheldon, the same gravelly talent behind Conjunction Junction. The curious kid asking questions in the segment was voiced by Sheldon's real-life son John, making it a quietly touching portrait of a father guiding his own child through democracy while simultaneously walking millions of others through their first civics lesson. Children learned how a bill moved through Congress before they could reliably name all 50 states. The version of democracy presented was deliberately optimistic, with no lobbyists, no filibusters, and no partisan gridlock anywhere in sight. The Simpsons later memorably parodied it, bringing Sheldon back to voice a considerably more jaded piece of legislation that knew exactly how the system really worked. If you can still sing the opening of the U.S. Constitution from memory but regularly forget your Wi-Fi password, you owe that remarkable feat directly to Schoolhouse Rock. The preamble first aired in November 1975 as part of America Rock, timed carefully with America's approaching bicentennial celebration. Lynn Ahrens wrote and performed the song early in her career, long before becoming a Tony Award-winning writer behind Broadway productions like Ragtime and Once on This Island. Her approach was simple but genuinely bold: set the actual text of the Constitution's preamble to a gentle folk-style melody and let repetition do the rest. To match the musical rhythm she needed, Ahrens cut just 4 words but otherwise kept the founders' original language completely intact. Teachers quickly adopted it as an essential classroom tool. Students who glazed over during conventional lectures suddenly found themselves reciting ancient constitutional language perfectly in tune. In 1976, the New York Times praised America Rock for turning the Constitution into a joyful musical experience, a rare compliment for any Saturday morning cartoon. For many viewers, the preamble wasn't just a catchy tune. It was their very first meaningful contact with the words that actually define American democratic government. When new episodes stopped airing in 1985, it looked like the end for Schoolhouse Rock. ABC quietly pulled the segments in favor of a fitness program. Then came one determined student with a cause. In 1991, University of Connecticut student Jennifer Wood decided Schoolhouse Rock deserved another life. Long before social media made campaigns easy, She gathered signatures the old-fashioned way, talking personally to classmates, professors, and neighbors until she had collected more than 2,000 names. The petition was modest in numbers, but enormous in cultural weight. It proved the audience for these 3-minute lessons hadn't disappeared. It had simply grown up and still cared deeply. Wood's effort joined a wider wave of letter-writing campaigns and word-of-mouth nostalgia from fans across the country. The network noticed. In 1992, ABC folded Schoolhouse Rock back into its Bugs Bunny hour block, and on August 28, 1993, the segments officially returned to Saturday mornings. Parents who had grown up with the show tuned in alongside their own children, and a brand new generation met I'm Just a Bill for the very first time. Once back on air in 1993, ABC didn't simply rerun the classics on a loop. The revival opened the door to something the original creators hadn't done in nearly a decade, making entirely new material. Fresh grammar rock segments came first, including busy prepositions and the tale of Mr. Morton, a gentle story teaching subject and predicate through a shy man's quiet love story. Then came Money Rock, debuting September 10, 1994, tackling topics the original run never touched, including budgeting, government revenue, the stock market, and national debt, represented memorably by a bill-swallowing dinosaur named Tyrannosaurus Debt. The renewed energy spilled into live theater when Schoolhouse Rock Live opened in Chicago on August 26, 1993, eventually reaching off-Broadway in 1995 for an 11-month run. In 1996, Rhino Records released a tribute album featuring Blind Melon, Better Than Ezra, The Lemonheads, Pavement, Moby, and Biz Markie, covering the classics they had grown up loving. It functioned as both a love letter and a torch passing, proving conclusively that the kids who grew up on the show had genuinely never stopped listening or caring about what it meant to them. By 2013, Schoolhouse Rock was 4 decades old. The children who first watched it were now parents and grandparents, but the songs hadn't faded even slightly. On January 6, 2013, Bob Dorough took the stage at the Kennedy Center's Millennium Stage for a 40th anniversary celebration. The venue typically draws dozens or low hundreds for its free concerts. For Schoolhouse Rock, an estimated 700 to 1,000 devoted fans showed up, packing the aisles and lining the stairways completely. Together they sang Junction, Junction, and 3 is a magic number, as though they had never forgotten a single syllable, because honestly they hadn't. It felt less like a concert, and far more like a deeply emotional reunion of people connected by a shared childhood experience that had quietly shaped who they became. 40 years after its debut, Schoolhouse Rock could still fill a room and move an entire crowd to sing together in perfect, joyful unison. For all the joy and nostalgia Schoolhouse Rock delivered across decades, the people who built it saw surprisingly little of the money it generated. The reason lies in how the series was born. Created inside the advertising agency McCaffrey and McCall, it was structured as work for hire from the very beginning. Legally, that meant everything. The songs, characters, animation, and concepts belonged entirely to the agency, and by extension to the network. Bob Dorough was reportedly paid a flat fee per song, just as he would have been for a standard commercial jingle, with no ongoing royalties attached. Even as the show became a cultural touchstone, he still needed regular club dates to make a living. Lynn Ahrens was in a similar position, receiving modest one-time fees for contributions that went on to live permanently in millions of minds. When Disney acquired ABC in 1996, the entire Schoolhouse Rock library became Disney property. From that point forward, all profits from home video, merchandise, reruns, and licensing flowed to the corporate parent, not to the writers and musicians who had actually created everything from nothing. Dorough chose not to dwell on the imbalance. He continued performing Schoolhouse Rock songs well into his 80s, smiling warmly as audiences sang along from memory. The recognition was real, even when the royalty checks were not. They didn't make millions, but they taught millions. And that is precisely the kind of legacy no contract can ever fully measure or take away.